Ben Johnson has said no to the Washington Commanders in a very interesting development. The Lions offensive coordinator will be now staying with the team for another full season, in his words, to try to outbring a Lombardi trophy to Detroit. Now, this is a major blow to the Washington Commanders, who I believe have their heart set on the Lions OC as their new head coach. Now, I've said about Ben Johnson that as I've watched the Lions more and more, obviously they've been on more TV here, into the regular season and into the postseason. I think Ben Johnson is a really good play caller. At times, though, I thought he went into too much of a show. I did not think he was as aggressive, but we cannot deny it. We saw it this year, obviously, with the Philadelphia Eagles, losing Shane Steichen to the Colts and Jonathan Gannon to the Cardinals. That in the NFL, and I've been in management positions before. My last semester in college, I was the general manager of my college radio station. Bookstore Radio, the best college radio station in the damn land, especially in Ohio, from Kent State University, that you are only as good as your staff. And I truly believed it. I had a great staff that I absolutely adore and still talk to this day. And so the success of Nick Sirianni, the success of Dan Campbell, the success of Andy Reid, the success of Kyle Shanahan, John Harbaugh, etc. Your success oftentimes, and again, coaching really does matter. Being a head coach matters. Being an OC, a DC, defensive line coach, defensive backs, assistant wide receivers coach, whatever you will have you. Coaching matters in football. Coaching matters in life. And as a head coach, you are only as successful as your staff. So I like Ben Johnson. I like the way he designed plays. But we have seen for years and years and years, there's a trend in this league. Greg Williams, Wade Phillips, Todd Haley, I would say Matt Nagy, Jason Garrett. There are very good. Arthur Smith is probably in this category. There are very good offensive and defensive coaches that are just better coordinators than they are head coaches. Being a head coach is hard, and I've said this. When you go from being a coordinator, and this is what a lot of people do not understand, even if you are a coordinator not calling plays, the coordinator's job is to run the drills in practice, run the meeting rooms, work with the players on footwork, work with the coaches on game plan, work with the players on other skills. Be very involved in coaching. Just because you're not calling the plays on game day does not necessarily mean you are not contributing as a coordinator. And so for me, for Ben Johnson, and we've seen now Matt Eberflus who wanted to do this in Chicago. He was the play caller in Indianapolis, decided he wanted to be a CEO head coach. And we know the difference between NFL head coaching and college head coaching. College head coaching, you are your own man. You go out, you recruit your own players. You are essentially the face of the program. The only person you have to really answer to is the athletic director, and now you got to compete, obviously, for NIL in recruiting. But in the NFL, you are coaching grown men with families and lives. You have an owner you have to, abide to. You have a general manager you have to abide to. There's free agency, there's the draft, there's the schedule, there's training camp, there's mini camp, there's preseason, there's press conferences before and after the game, there's representing, as a professional in an organization, being a leader. There's so much that goes into being a head coach besides can you just call plays. It's about can you be a leader of men? And I like Ben Johnson. I thought he was going to be successful if he got the Commander's job, but him deciding to go back to Detroit and waiting for the perfect opportunity is reminiscent of what Josh McDaniels did all those years in New England. Now we'll see if it pays off for Ben Johnson. I will say this. I do not think, and again, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, but I do not think that with the Commanders, the same old Commanders. They have a new ownership and they are clearly taking their time with this head coaching search. And the biggest positive about this job is You have the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. We know Caleb Williams is probably going to Chicago, though if for some reason Chicago decided to stay with Justin Fields, you can go and you can get Caleb Williams. I don't know about Drake May. I haven't studied a lot of him. I have not seen a ton in North Carolina. I know about Michael Penix. I think he's going to be a system quarterback. I think depends on where he goes. Same thing with JJ McCarthy. I think Bo Nix from Oregon reminds me a lot of Justin Herbert. I think he has, good potential. And then there's Jaden McDaniels from LSU, who I think really is the wild card in all of this. So wherever the Commanders go in the draft, you have the number 2 overall pick. You have a great receiver in Terry McLaurin, great backs, a decent offensive line, a very good defensive line. You need to clean up your secondary, which was shockingly bad with Ron Rivera, their defensive coach. Jack Del Rio, who's another example of, again, very good coordinator, not a great head coach, struggled with the defense in Washington. And then obviously you got to get the quarterback right. We know Sam Howell is not the answer. But Ben Johnson was so good in Detroit. And my concern from a Lions perspective about losing Ben Johnson is the same concern I had about the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts last year, losing Shane Steichen. And Jalen Hurts has talked about this a lot. Having a consistent play caller and a consistent scheme is so important to success in the National Football League. And the Lions are going to bring back almost their entire offensive line. Amon-Ra St. Brown, both running backs. Sam Laporta is still growing. They have a dominant O-line, as I mentioned. They really need to focus on the defensive side of the ball. Can they get another corner? Can they get another pass rusher outside of Aiden Hutchinson? Whether it's free agency or draft, those are the two positions they need to address. I think, offensively, they're pretty much set. And with Ben Johnson coming back, Jared Goff has never looked better since Ben Johnson took over. Remember, the Lions struggled out of the gate. They started, I think, 0-11 or something like that, finished 3-13 in Dan Campbell's first season without Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson comes in as OC. They start out the year 1-6. I and many others thought Dan Campbell, who we all loved for his opening press conference, was about to be out the door. And ever since then, they lost 2 games in last year's regular season. Obviously, go on to the NFC Championship game. And we have talked about a lot of finishing the story here on Brand's World, whether it's Cody Rhodes, CM Punk in professional wrestling. Can the Detroit Lions finish their story? That's what Ben Johnson wants to do. It's a major blow for the Commanders, in my opinion. I don't know who they're going to go with as head coach because I do think they need to go after an offensive-minded head coach because an offensive-minded head coach is going to be able to fix a young quarterback the way a defensive-minded head coach, I believe, will not. I think this head coach needs to be, a very good coach, let the defense out of the ball, let a great DC run the defense, and you fix the offense. Ben Johnson, I think, will be a major candidate next year. We'll see what jobs open up. Obviously, I think the Saints job could open up. Dallas is the one that's talk. If they fail, would Mike McCarthy get fired? Who knows about Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia? If Brian Dable has another disaster season, the Giants job could open up. Maybe Arizona, Jonathan Gannon. That's just NFC jobs. On the AFC side, I don't think there's going to be a ton of jobs opening up. Maybe a Mike Tomlin potentially, falls down in Pittsburgh, or the Sean Payton experiment in Denver becomes a disaster again. Robert Saleh even with the Jets. So there's going to be some job openings there. Ben Johnson, I'm sure, will have the pick of his litter. Sounds like his asking price was high. He knows his worth, but he also wants to finish the story with the Detroit Lions. It's a major addition for the Lions, who will now not have to change offensive scheme, and it's a major letdown for Washington that Ben Johnson is back in 2024. Yeah, so originally this topic was only going to be about Ben Johnson, but then breaking news just came down here. Mike Macdonald is the new head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, the Ravens defensive coordinator. And after we all thought Dan Quinn, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, who I believe now will be back as Dallas's DC, was in line to take over for Pete Carroll, Seattle has found Mike Macdonald, who obviously led an incredible Ravens defense this year, got a lot of productivity out of, I would say average guys, especially up front, and a banged up secondary. The Ravens were a dominating defense, not only in the regular season, but throughout most of the postseason. Shut out the Kansas City Chiefs in the second half, even in a losing effort. Mike Macdonald is now tasked to get the Seattle Seahawks back on task. Now, I will say this. It's a very strange hire, and I get it. As we just talked about with Ben Johnson, you're not necessarily looking for a guy that's a great play caller. You're looking for a guy who can be a leader of men. But I'll say this, I said with Ben Johnson. As everybody knows that have listened to me on this podcast for a long time, I lean more towards offensive coaches, especially if you have a young quarterback. Because I believe, guys like Kevin Stefanski this year that had to deal with four different quarterbacks, or a guy like Matt LaFleur, who seemingly flipped Jordan Love from what I believe was going to be a bust to a great quarterback overnight. Justin Fields, we saw his development this year with a defensive coach, Matt Eberflus. Yeah, it wasn't great. If you have a young quarterback, I believe an offensive minded coach is better for you. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Obviously, CJ Stroud, D'Amico Ryan's a defensive coach, but D'Amico Ryan's lucked out hiring an all star offensive coordinator in Bobby Slowick. Will Mike Macdonald be able to hire an all star OC to help with whatever young quarterback Seattle goes with? Because I don't think it should be Geno Smith. Last year, Geno Smith regressed towards the end of the year. The year before, we all knew it was sort of a fluke year. Again, I think Shane Waldron, who's the new Bears OC, did as good of a job with Geno Smith as you possibly could. Now, Seattle does have good weapons. Again, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, two very good young offensive tackles. Jamal Adams is really their most notable name in the secondary. We'll see if Bobby Wagner, comes back at linebacker. So that's the side of the ball Seattle really needs to fix. Pete Carroll was a energizer creator, a great culture setter. I see Mike Macdonald being sort of a younger version potentially of Pete Carroll. So I completely understand the move by Seattle. The problem is, though, what are you going to do at quarterback? Because if Geno Smith is your quarterback and now he's going to have a new offensive coordinator, if that OC is not as good or, just a little bit worse than Shane Waldron, Seattle's not going to be very good next year. Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers at this point are in the Super Bowl. Sean McVay took maybe the worst offensive line of the league and potentially, the worst defense of the league. I mean, it was Aaron Donald and a bunch of kids, and Raheem Morris who led that group. And there was a reason why Raheem Morris got the Atlanta Falcons job, because he led that group. The Rams got back to the playoffs. They're going to be seemingly better next year. It sounds like Brandon Staley, their old DC, who we made fun of a ton with the Chargers, but he was a good defensive coordinator with the Rams. Could he be back in the picture? And then Jonathan Gannon and the Arizona Cardinals. Do they win Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver? Do they give Kyler Murray weapons? They were competitive at the end of the year with all their draft picks and their free agency capital money. We expect them to bolster up their offense and their defense. Arizona could be more competitive next year. So for Seattle, which has, again, a great roster, if you're a Seahawks fan, I'd be excited about the prospects because I think your defense is going to be very good. If you get a quarterback, whether it's, again, Michael Penix, who is from Washington, I suspect that might be the guy that they go target. I see him as sort of a little bit bigger and a more accurate to attack Tagovailoa, but he needs to be in a system like Mike McDaniel's system, whether it's a J.J. McCarthy, a Jaden Daniels, a Bo Nix, whoever Seattle wants to go target. Maybe they go out and they try to get Kirk Cousins. I mean, who knows? Maybe they go out and try to get Justin Fields. Seattle needs an upgraded quarterback. That will be Mike Macdonald's mission. I almost want to say Mike McDaniel. Seattle, in a lot of ways, is a better version of Atlanta. I think Seattle has a little bit better weapons than Atlanta overall. I think they have a tiny bit better offensive line. Atlanta may have a little bit better defense, but both of these two teams in the NFC will be chasing quarterback, and that will determine the success of both Mike Macdonald and Raheem Morris moving forward. But congratulations to Mike Macdonald. The NFL coaching cycle just continues to get heated up. Ben Johnson back in Detroit. Mike Macdonald, the new head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, replacing Pete Carroll, who will seemingly not get a job this cycle.